Hello and welcome to the second video lecture for criminology. I mentioned in the last video that what I do here is primarily just read from the transcripts that's also available on the website. Almost verbatim, but I add a few things. But I wanted to clarify that the transcripts have links to websites and other documents, reports, etc. that you might want to follow up on or maybe read along with as you watch this video lecture, however you want to handle it. And I also want to mention that the images you see in the background as I'm lecturing are just random criminology images that I put together so you have something to look at other than my ugly face, right? So having said that, and also wanting to say you can email me with questions or concerns or post comments about these lectures or anything about the course in our discussion forum. Let's get started. In this next lecture, I want to talk about some primary theories in criminology, which we define as the study of crime and crime-related phenomena. These theories often get overlooked as the best starting point when we want to understand crime and all its causes and consequences, so I think it's important that we visit them. And this is really my big beef with the American criminal justice industry, which I purposely label as an industry, because the programs and policies that drive it are not well grounded in well-established scholarship on the causes and consequences of crime, on the strong empirical evidence shown by the scholarship, or by theories that derive from the research. This is why, as with any course you take called criminology, you're going to get a lot of theories thrown at you. But make no mistake, these theories are not born out of thin air. They are actually tried and tested ideas that have stood the test of time in explaining the complex array of behaviors that we call crime, and in understanding how society responds or could respond better to crime and deviance. Which brings me to another important point. Not all deviant behavior is a crime, and not all crimes are deviant. If you're wondering why that tattooed face people are on there, it has something to do with this part. This is an important point because we often confuse the two. Deviance, which is defined as a violation of social norms, might be criminal, as in the case of mixing meth in a bathtub, but not always, as in the case of mixing kava in a bowl for traditional Polynesian social gatherings or adding peyote to your tea. And as you can see, it can sometimes even be the exact same behavior. In this case, creating a chemical liquid for a mind-altering experience. Crime, on the other hand, is defined merely as a violation of written law, which is quite another matter, raising lots of different questions. In fact, in the sociological tradition, we always start a discussion of crime with a discussion of what is a crime and why. And this is why we start by talking about deviance, because if a deviant behavior, or if a behavior in general, is not deemed deviant by any given nation, society, or community, then it will most likely not become a crime. With some exceptions, and there's a link on our transcripts for that. That is to say, it's not the actual behavior that determines what becomes a crime. It's how a community perceives that behavior. In class, in fact, I go even further to suggest that no human behavior has ever been universally deviant, that all human behavior, even what we might think of as the most vile, has at one time or another, in one place or another, been considered acceptable and even normative. Wait a minute, what's that you say, Londra? What about rape or murder? Haven't these behaviors always been seen as bad or at least unwelcome? Actually, no. Across many cultures, past and present, including in American marriage laws up until the mid-20th century, it was legal and permissible to rape. In America, a man couldn't be convicted of raping his wife because, until fairly recently, in fact until the 80s, a wife was the legal property of the man in marriage by law, and you can't rape your property. And what about murder? Well, if you're a cop on duty, or if you're a soldier at war, you have a better chance of getting a medal for killing someone than being arrested for it. Remember, we're talking about the act of killing another human being, not what we label that behavior, whether it be murder or a police shooting. So is there anything that humans have done that has always been considered deviant and outlawed? At this point in class, after I've offered a crisp $5 bill for anyone who can think of something, we start generating a list that usually looks like has sex with family members, incest, sex with children, pedophilia, sex with animals, bestiality, eating people, cannibalism, eating dead people, necrophilia, and eating dead children after having sex with their dead bodies. And so it goes. But think about it. Each one of those acts has been an acceptable part of one culture or another, in one subculture or another, and at one time or another. The royal family of England committed incest. The Greek tradition of adult men taking young male concubines as sex servants, pedophilia. The Donner Party that was forced to survive in the Oregon wilderness during a harsh winter by eating the remains of those who had died from the cold. There's your cannibalism. And sex with animals, bestiality. I give you Iowa, where the men are men and the sheep are nervous. Totally kidding about that. I could point to several tribal societies such as the Incans, the Mayans, who reportedly had sex with animals before killing them for food as an honorary right to absorb the animal's spirit and retain its wild essence, and other kinds of things that would serve as an example of how what we consider deviant changes over time and across cultures. Let's not also forget the modern day examples of these acts that are considered normal. Take pedophilia. Although it's certainly a crime in the U.S., there are subcultures within our country today that find sex with children to be completely acceptable, such as the members of NAMBLA. South Park viewers, you'll get that one. NAMBLA is an actual American-based organization of mostly old white men who are trying to pass legislation that would allow consensual sex between adult men and minors, boys and girls. NAMBLA stands for the North American Man-Boy Love Association, by the way. And by the way, how old do you have to be a child? Even the definition of a child differs across state lines, so actually sex with a person in one state or country might be legal, but illegal in another state or country. So what actually is deviant? Is it the act itself or the public reaction to that act? Suffice to say, I rarely have to shell out that $5, although on occasion I have. This is just what Howard Becker, a famous sociologist, meant when he said this, and I quote, "It is easily observable that different groups judge different things to be deviant. This should alert us to the possibility that the person making the judgment of deviance, the process by which that judgment is arrived at, and the situation in which it is made may all be intimately involved in the phenomenon of deviance. To the degree that the common sense view of deviance and the scientific theories that begin with the premises assume that acts that break rules are inherently deviant, and thus take for granted the situations and processes of judgment that may leave out an important variable." The sociology behind crime, then, is a critical perspective that first asks the question that we typically never ask. Questions like, what is criminal in a society, and why? How does a community's reaction to a particular behavior result in the creation of laws that outlaw that behavior, and why? And this is where those theories you are going to read about become important. From this starting point, thinking about the nature of deviance and crime itself as a social phenomena, scholars in sociology and the related disciplines of history, political science, psychology, and criminal justice have constructed sets of common ideas with a ton of empirical testing and retesting and came up with these theories. These theories, because of how they were generated, offer us a more reliable basis of understanding crime, better than your own personal observations, and better than any one expert or prophet, because these ideas have stood the test of time. When the ideas we've tested didn't show any logical or empirical support in our research, they faded away. What's left are the theories you're about to read about. So give them their due and give them your respect. These are tried and true. So please, please, please take this message to heart. This is a big point in my class. These theories and the particular ideas within them are important. They're important because these are the tools we should be using to both understand crime in America and to develop solutions to them. Solutions that are fair and equitable and which actually work. Have you ever wondered, for instance, why we live in a country with the highest incarceration rate among all developed nations on the planet? That's right, we've got over 2 million people in prison and jail. About 1 in every 99 citizens, American citizens, are locked up. This is a higher rate of incarceration than China or Russia or even Africa under apartheid. We're also the last developed country to still impose the death penalty. Yet we still have the highest crime rate. And despite the fact that we spend more than every other nation on our prison system, about $80 billion a year, the largest industry in the nation next to pharmaceuticals, our crime rates continue to be well above the average among other developed nations, particularly with gun homicides. There's a link on our website, on the transcript, to an article, and we've got several articles on gun homicides and gun-related violence in America that fit in nicely right here if you get a chance to look at them. And most prisoners, once released, will go on to reoffend, having learned valuable lessons from other criminals while they were imprisoned. Or take juvenile delinquency as another example. Kids who enter a program for delinquents, from residential homes to detention, have about a 60 to 80% recidivism rate, meaning most of them reoffend, usually within a year. So what are we doing wrong? In my opinion, we're not using our heads. Specifically, we're not drawing on the important scholarship and theory to guide our programs and policies. Instead of relying on the evidence we've gathered using the scientific method, we rely on our whims and fantasies about quote-unquote super predators and half-cocked ideas about quote-unquote broken windows theory, which is a chronically misunderstood theory by James Q. Wilson. The media is just totally distorted. This is where you come in. I need you, especially those of you who think you might pursue a career in criminal justice, to enter this field with an eye toward theory and scholarship, to appreciate and draw from the insights of your elders into the cause and consequence of crime. They might equip you with a gun, but if you're not equipped to understand the environment you're policing in, you'll fail to help solve the problem of crime at all, and you very well might make it worse. You won't understand why you're doing what you're doing, or even worse, you won't care. Okay, at this point, since these videos can't be more than 15 minutes long, I'm going to break and do the second half of it in the next clip, and it might take 2 or 3 of these to get through this week. This is the longest lecture I have in this class because it deals with theory, because theory is this important to me, and I want to hammer that point home. So continue on, hit the next file or 2, and we'll finish the video lecture.